Imagine being 30,000 feet in the air, and suddenly, the engines cut off. No warning, no way out. This is the story of survival when everything falls apart. Asterisk, will they survive? Watch the impossible journey unfold. Asterisk, Mia Watson, 32 years old, had spent the last few days in back-to-back meetings across the country. By Friday evening, she was drained and eager to head home. She had endured client dinners, endless presentations, and very little sleep. All she wanted was a few quiet hours in her apartment, far away from the chaos of work at Denver International Airport. The usual noise of rolling suitcases, loudspeaker announcements, and the occasional baby's cry filled the air. Mia checked the screen. Her flight 227, was on time. Her heart eased, thankful for the smooth travel ahead. She had no patience for delays. She made her way to the gate, scrolling through her phone. A message from her mom popped up. "Call me when you land. Love you." Mia had planned to call, but the day's exhaustion had made her delay. When it was her turn to board, she handed the gate agent her boarding pass and walked through the jet bridge. The familiar scent of recycled air hit her as she stepped inside the cabin. A flight attendant smiled at her, guiding her to her seat. Row 8A, the window seat, her favorite. There was something comforting about looking out at the clouds while the world below disappeared. She placed her bag in the overhead bin, sank into her seat, and relaxed. She could feel the cold leather of the seat beneath her. Her purse was tucked safely under the seat in front of her, and she leaned back, allowing her eyes to close. Around her, the hum of conversations, the clink of trays, and the rustle of newspapers blended into background noise. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration, but Mia, a frequent traveler, barely noticed. Seatbelts, life vests, oxygen masks, she'd heard it all before. She simply fastened her seatbelt, let out a deep breath, and let her mind drift. The engines came to life, humming beneath her. The plane slowly taxied down the runway, and Mia allowed herself to fall into a light sleep, the vibrations of the plane almost like a lullaby. She thought about her weekend plans, sleeping in, maybe brunch with her brother, and catching up with her mom. As the plane ascended, Mia's thoughts drifted in and out. The familiar sensation of takeoff, the thrill of defying gravity, felt comforting. She closed her eyes again, surrendering to sleep. The hum of the engines filled her mind, steady and reassuring. But then, something changed. A faint vibration ran through the plane, and Mia stirred. She opened her eyes briefly, but there was nothing unusual. The cabin lights reflected in the window, but outside, only the darkness of night stretched endlessly. Mia shrugged it off. It was probably just turbulence. She closed her eyes again, allowing herself to relax. The steady rhythm of the flight rocking her back to sleep. Suddenly, the plane lurched. It wasn't like the usual turbulence. This was sharper, stronger. The overhead bins rattled, and Mia felt a jolt run through the plane. She opened her eyes again, but this time, she wasn't alone in her discomfort. A loud crash of a drink cart tipping over reverberated through the cabin. Mia's heart pounded in her chest. The plane shuddered again, the rattling intensifying, followed by a loud bang, metallic and hollow. The noise echoed through the fuselage. Panic started to spread across the cabin. Some passengers gasped. Others were gripping their armrests, staring out the windows. Then, the sound everyone feared. The engines fell silent. A void of noise filled the cabin, replaced only by the sound of rushing wind, tearing through the outside of the plane. Mia's mind raced. She knew the drill. One engine failure was survivable, but both? Was that even possible? The flight attendants moved quickly, trying to calm the passengers, but there was an unmistakable tension in the air. Mia's fingers tightened around the armrests. She could feel her chest tighten, her breaths shallow. Panic was creeping up on her, but she held it in, trying to force herself to stay calm. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have lost both engines." The captain's voice was calm, but slow, delivering words that seemed impossible. The entire cabin went still, followed by whispers, gasps, and some outright screams. "Stay calm, stay seated," the flight attendants instructed, but the fear in their eyes was unmistakable. Mia could feel the plane's descent. It was subtle but unmistakable, and her heart raced with each passing second. She could see the fear in the passengers around her, their eyes wide with terror, their hands clenched in their laps. The plane continued its descent, and Mia pressed her forehead to the window, peering into the darkness. Outside, there was nothing but blackness, a vast emptiness. The world seemed to shrink, the noise of the wind, the pressure in her chest, all growing louder. She thought of her mother's message. "Call me when you land." Guilt squeezed her heart. What if she never got the chance to call? What if she never saw her family again? Then the captain's voice came through again. "We are preparing for an emergency landing. Please follow the instructions of the crew." The words didn't offer much comfort. The sense of helplessness overwhelmed her, but the crew remained composed, moving with practiced efficiency. Mia gripped her seat, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. Her mind raced. Could they make it? Was there a chance? She didn't know, but she clung to the words of the captain, to the hope that somehow they would survive. The descent continued, sharp and steady. The plane dipped and jolted, and Mia's heart raced. She thought of all the things she still wanted to do: travel, see Paris, write that book she always promised herself she would start. But most of all, she thought of her family, her mom, her brother, her friends. She wasn't ready to leave them. She wasn't ready to let go of the ordinary moments laughing with friends, the smell of fresh coffee, the warmth of family. The flight attendants continued to move through the cabin, their movements steady but strained. They offered instructions, checked seatbelts, and reminded everyone to stay calm. Mia tried to focus on their voices, but everything felt so distant, like she was floating outside her own body. Then, a voice came over the intercom again. "We are attempting to restart the engines. Please remain calm. We are descending under control." Mia clung to that word, restart. Restart meant there was hope. The engines weren't gone forever. The plane wasn't falling helplessly toward the ground. They could still make it. But with every passing second, the plane descended lower and lower, and the world outside the window remained dark and empty. Mia's thoughts spiraled again. She gripped her seat tighter, forcing herself to breathe deeply. It was all she could do to remain grounded, to stay present, even if every inch of her body screamed for survival. Mia had never experienced anything like this. It was as though the world had slowed down, but at the same time, it felt like it was hurtling toward a terrifying fate at full speed. The silence that followed the engine failure was the worst part. It wasn't like the usual sounds of air rushing past, or the soft hum of the engines. No, this was the sound of complete and utter emptiness. The rush of wind outside tore through the fuselage, and the plane's descent was sharp. Mia could feel it in her chest, an undeniable tug pulling them downward. The panic around her had turned into a low, collective hum, a constant undercurrent of fear and uncertainty. Her fingers tightened around the armrests, her nails digging into the material as she tried to steady herself. The flight attendants moved swiftly, their faces set in grim determination, checking seatbelts, calming passengers, and handing out oxygen masks. The instructions they gave came fast, but their eyes betrayed the terror they were also feeling. Mia caught a glance of one of the attendants, her hand shaking as she adjusted a mask on a crying child. The professional facade was wearing thin, but Mia understood. They were all in this together. Mia's mind raced. Could they survive this? Was there any way they could still land the plane safely? She wanted to believe the crew would get them out of this. They had been trained for emergencies, hadn't they? But the overwhelming sense of helplessness was impossible to ignore. It felt as though gravity itself had taken hold, refusing to let go. The plane continued its descent, dipping slightly before leveling off again, only to dip once more, a steady reminder that they were still plummeting. Mia tried to distract herself, focusing on the rhythm of her breathing. She was aware of every sound around her, the faint crackling of the intercom, the frantic whispers of the passengers, the eerie sound of the wind rushing past. The plane felt like it was losing altitude every second. She thought of her mother. Again, her last message to Mia echoed in her head. "Call me when you land. Love you." Mia had planned to call her when she got home, but now she wasn't sure she'd ever get the chance. Guilt washed over her, followed by an overwhelming wave of regret. Was this it? Was she going to die here, thousands of feet in the air, far from everything she knew? Mia pressed her forehead against the cold window, trying to steady herself. The darkness outside gave her no comfort, only an endless stretch of black. No lights, no signs of life, just an unfeeling void. Then the voice of the captain broke through the growing panic. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have lost both engines. We are preparing for an emergency landing. Please remain calm, stay seated, and follow the crew's instructions." The words hit Mia like a punch to the stomach. Both engines. That didn't happen. Not to planes like this.